Hello everybody, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to this week's live chat or video if you're watching it on catch up. And today we are going to be mainly focusing on part 2 of how to read a Tudor house. We started that last week and we are going to be finishing off this week as we didn't quite have chance to make it right the way through. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, I know quite a few do know me. Mine's Sarah and I'm the founder of the Tudor Travel Guide, and the Tudor Travel Guide is your visitor's companion to the houses, castles and manors of the 16th century. So while we wait for people to turn up, and I can see people are already arriving, as ever, do give me a thumbs up. I think you can hear me okay, which is brilliant, but just let me know you can, and give me a thumbs up, give me a heart, say hello from wherever you are in the world. So we've got Gillian. Hi Gillian from Milton Keynes, and Anna. Yes, lovely to see you, Anna. And Monica, lovely Monica from Italy. Hello there. And we've got Jane and we've got Stephanie so far. Yeah, great to see you all here. That's fantastic. So I hope wherever you are in the world, you've either got off to a good start or you've had a good day. So, so just a note before we go on, of course, as I am talking, feel free to share your thoughts or your reflections, any questions that you might have. Hello again, Catherine. That's lovely to see you. And Steve from Atlanta, Georgia. That's lovely. And if there's anybody you know who might be interested in this live chat, of course, feel free to tag them in the comments. And if you're watching this after the live chat, again, I do check the comments and I do try and reply to everybody, particularly if there's any questions, even if they come in after the live chat. So feel free to leave those. And I'm just smiling because I can see Elizabeth. I'll drag Elizabeth's comment here. Hi from Bewdley. I'm on a walk, so hope I can keep connected. So Bewdley, of course, where the wonderful Tickenhall Palace is, that is so associated with Arthur Tudor. So lucky you. And hello, Janice from East Sussex. Woo, good. Okay, so now I did say at the top of this chat that this was part 2 of how to read a Tudor house. Now, if you didn't catch part 1, then it is up on my YouTube channel. You just have to nip over to YouTube and type in the Tudor Travel Guide to find my channel, and you should be able to find in live chat the How to Read a House, Tudor House Part 1. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about that was because, as I mentioned last week, when I learned that there was basically a set pattern in terms of how particularly aristocratic houses of the 16th century are laid out and arranged, it really helped me when I was visiting them to bring certain events alive, because I could understand how the different rooms were being used. And it became a real sort of quiz and a puzzle to try and work out which door would go where, etc. And it just made the whole visit so much more fulfilling and so much more fun. And that's why I'm so keen to share with folk what I've learned from researching a lot of Tudor properties for my In the Footsteps book. So I hope that you too, when you go visiting and you visit some of the larger houses that you will see, you'll be able to go, oh yes, I know what that's all about. So good. Now, when we finished last week, we'd gone through the public chambers of the house. So we'd really started at the Great Hall, the largest, the most public chamber in any kind of aristocratic house of the period. And then we'd moved through into the Great Watching Chamber and then into the Presence Chamber. And we were about to step from the public into the private. So as we talk about these rooms, as I mentioned last week, you really have to be thinking about some of the larger aristocratic properties of the day. The larger the property, of course, the greater the number of the rooms, and that was a matter of status. the smaller properties might have had some of the key essential rooms, but maybe not all the chambers that we're going to be talking about today. So it's not a foolproof template, but again, you can kind of, once you know what you're looking for, you can kind of make out what's what. So now, before though we go into those privy chambers, I've got something really special that I want to share with you. Now, for those of you who are turning up to this live chat, this is a bit of a world exclusive, and I'm really excited about this. I have mentioned on a couple of occasions that I am working behind the scenes on creating a series, virtual tour of Tudor London. So these will be a series of videos where I try and recreate certain key places in Tudor London, such as Greenwich Palace, Hampton Court Palace, Westminster Hall Palace, etc., as they would have been during the Tudor era. Now, as I was trying to put this together, and the first one up will be Greenwich Palace, and hopefully you'll be happy to hear I'm quite way down getting that one sorted, I realised there was not really any good imagery of any of Henry's presence chambers. As you know, a lot of the palaces have been lost. Henry's palaces have been lost. We do have Hampton Court, but even there, the presence chamber has gone. So we have the Great Hall and we have the watching chamber, but no presence chamber. And I wanted to find a way of bringing that to life and illustrating it. So I've been working with Catherine Holman, who some of you may follow on social media. She's a wonderful illustrator, and we've been working together to do some reconstructive drawings of a great watching chamber and also a presence chamber. So this drawing that I'm about to show you, I wanted to show you because it illustrates some of the things we were talking about last week, and it gives you a sneaky peek into kind of what I've been doing behind the scenes. So let me just show you this and see what you make of it. So I'd be really, really excited to hear if I can. There we go. So this is a sketch. It's not the final drawing. It's just a preliminary sketch that the wonderful Katie Holman has put together. So we've taken Greenwich as our template. So this is an attempt to perhaps recreate what the presence chamber of Greenwich might have looked like. And I've taken pictures of Greenwich from the outside, so what the windows look like. We've used the backdrop of the presence chamber from the painting of the family of Henry VIII, which is thought to have been painted in Whitehall, but we've used the kind of sense of what the throne and the canopy of a state would have looked like. And I've also used contemporary accounts of flooring, etc. So here you can see, I don't know, it'd be lovely to hear what you think of this. We're in the presence chamber, looking towards the high end, obviously with the throne, the canopy of the state, and the cupboard over on the right-hand side, which was often present in a presence chamber to display gold plate. And again, that was a matter of status and wealth. So yeah, great, Anna. So Anna's saying, let's type that in. So, oh wow, that's what I would see in my head. So great. I just think I love these reconstructive drawings, and I think Katie's doing an amazing job, and she's busy actually painting it this week. So you will see the final thing come to life at some point. So let me just take that off a minute. Okay, good. So we were about to, as I say, pass from the presence chamber into the private part. Now, this was a really important point of transition in any Tudor palace. So often there was almost like an airlock between the presence chamber and the first privy chamber in the sequence. And again, I'll stress there was always a sequence of rooms, and it's useful to realise that as you went through the sequence, the rooms generally got smaller and smaller, and they became more and more private. And the further you went into the privy lodgings, the more restricted were the number of people who could gain access to the king and queen. So there was an airlock that, and I love that word airlock. That's a word that Simon Thurley, I'm a big fan of Simon Thurley, and I'm going to shout about one of his books shortly. But he describes this airlock between the presence chamber and the next chamber, the Privy Chamber. So it's usually a short corridor. Now, again, I'm going to show you a little picture of this. Now, this doesn't look very exciting really as a picture, but when I first started researching Hampton Court Palace, I was so excited to actually go to Hampton Court Palace with the original plans of the palace as they were during the kind of the early Henrician period. And when I overlaid what I kind of was there today and the plans that I had in my little sweaty hands, what I realised was that I think this is a corridor that linked between Henry's Privy Chamber and the bedchamber, which you can see in the far room. But it's a similar type of principle, and it often existed between the presence chamber and the Privy Chamber. And it's an interesting corridor because often there were two small rooms off this corridor. One was the Privy Chapel, and the other was adjacent to it, parallel to it, was another small chamber called often called the kneeling place. Now, I don't know whether you're aware, but of course, all the royal palaces had a chapel royal, but the king and queen actually did not generally use the chapel royal on a day-to-day basis. They certainly did on high days and holy days, but not always on an everyday basis. So the monarch had to have a private chapel that was easily accessible from within their privy lodgings. And this was the kneeling place, was where the king would go in, he would sit, kneel, whatever, obviously doing a lot of paperwork quite often. And then there would be a lattice window in the wall, and on the other side of the wall would be the chapel, and the priest would say the mass, and of course Henry could hear the mass being said in his private room. And that's how he would have had his religious observance on a day-to-day basis before, no doubt, heading out on the hunt. So I'll just get rid of that then for a moment. So you can still see that corridor at Hampton Court Palace. It's in the Cumberland Suite if you are interested. So, okay. So Jane is saying, yes, Henry was so self-centered and a chamber like this would have made him look even more important. Yes, you're so right. You're so right. A lot of pomp and circumstance going on there. Okay, so now we go into the Privy Chamber. It's the first private chamber of the royal lodgings. I often think of this, and I think I might have mentioned this last week, as almost like a sitting room or a lounge. It was a place for relaxing. It was a place for entertaining, talking to honoured guests or family, and in the evening, relaxing, playing cards, dice, etc. And from there, you would then begin to move through the rest of the sequence of rooms. So this is where it starts to alter slightly. There would always be a bedchamber in the very largest palaces, and the one that immediately comes to mind that I remember reading about was Windsor Castle. There might be the first bedchamber might be a state bedchamber with a very, very large state bed, but that was not necessarily where the king slept. As I say, in the very largest palaces, there may have been more than one bedroom, and a smaller bedroom, which was more of a private bedroom where the monarch would actually sleep. And perhaps while we're talking about bedchambers, it might be worthwhile just noting about where the king and queen slept when they shared a bed. Now, quite often, if you study any of the floor plans of Henry's palaces, you'll find that there's a shared bedroom or a bedroom because often the king and queen's sides would meet, and at the angle where they met was often a shared bedchamber, which meant that, of course, they could meet in private. They didn't have to progress through any public chambers if they wanted to spend the night together. And again, I'm thinking Windsor Castle is a classic example where you had the Queen's chambers from the public to the private, and eventually ending in a bedchamber, which was a shared bedchamber. And actually, I don't know if any of you have been to Windsor Castle, whether you can remember the layout of the rooms, but You might remember that there's one room in Windsor Castle which has the portraits of Princess Elizabeth as a sort of 13, 14-year-old, and there are a couple of other, I think there's a portrait of Mary Tudor there. Well, if you do go to Windsor Castle, do look out for that room, because that room was part of the Queen's private chambers, and part of that room, it's actually been moved around, changed around, the walls has been taken down, but at one stage you'd be standing in that shared bedchamber that the likes of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn would have shared together. Windsor's, we should do a talk on Windsor one day, because you can go there and think that there's nothing to see of the Tudor property, but actually, if you know what you're looking for, there's actually quite a lot that you can trace. So it's a really good one for sort of being a Sherlock Holmes and trying to get through and see beyond the later Georgian and Victorian facades. Good. Okay, so that would be the bedchamber, and then you would move on further, deeper. Yes, do Windsor. Yes, Steve. Yes, definitely. And Monica, you obviously loved it too. That's great. So beyond the bedchamber, again, this is where things start to change a little bit, but I'll introduce the raying chamber. So I remember when I first came to writing about Tudor buildings, I was like, what on earth is this raying chamber? Well, the raying chamber, for those of you who don't know, is the equivalent of a dressing room. So obviously the place where the monarch, separate room where the monarch would get dressed in the morning, assisted by the gentlemen of the privy household or ladies in waiting, etc. Of course, the royal wardrobe was often underneath the royal bedchamber, so that the clothes would be brought upstairs from the wardrobe. And again, Hampton Court is amazing for this. You've probably heard me witter on about this quite a lot. But if I go back to that drawing of that narrow corridor, you can't see it, but lying just inside the doorway on the right-hand side, there is a door that's closed. But if you ask really nicely for one of the guides, they might open it up for you, and you'll see this spiral staircase that's coming up from the ground floor, and that's actually coming up from Henry's privy wardrobe. So you would have a groom bring the clothes up to the top of the stairs, and then a gentleman of the Privy Chamber would accept the clothes, because obviously a groom was too lowly to be in the presence of the king, and he would take the clothes through to the king to dress him in the morning. So yeah, definitely, if you're in the Cumberland suite and there's a guide around, a friendly guide with a big smile on your face, say, oh, could you show me the entrance to the spiral staircase that went down to Henry's privy wardrobe? And you might be lucky. So from there, we have raying chamber. We have now usually a closet. So this was one of the smallest rooms. If you remember, we're talking about the fact that the rooms are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and more intimate. There's a wonderful suite of rooms actually at Hampton Court that's, I think it's closed at the moment because it's closed because it's closed for COVID, but it was the Woolsey suite. Ah, Lee, you've got a private tour. That's going to be amazing. So you know what to ask for. The Woolsey Closet there, again, is a suite of rooms used by Woolsey. And again, you get the idea of a privy chamber that goes into a slightly smaller chamber that goes into a slightly smaller chamber. And these small chambers, and this is actually one of them that I'm about to show you. It's an old black and white photo of one of those rooms. So I'll just go over here. It's an actual black and white photo of one of the rooms in the Woolsey Closet. And you can see you're now in a really small room. Or the Woolsey suite, I should say. The Woolsey Closet is actually a different room, but a similar type of thing. You've got a small room, very intimate, a place to be alone, to read, to write, maybe your private devotions, maybe you're having a very intimate conversation with somebody that you want definitely to remain private. Well, this would be where you would get away from it all if you were Henry or one of his queens, and beautiful kind of cozy little rooms. So I'll just get rid of that for a moment. Okay, So if you can hear barking in the background, that's my dog that's arrived on the scene. So from the closet, what else do we have? Well, there was also in the very high status houses, you would have a study or maybe even a library. So at Greenwich, for example, in the large donjon or tower which fronted onto the riverfront, that was where Henry had his private study and his library. I guess up on one of the upper floors. It meant the books were safe from any flooding from the river. But of course, libraries were really, really rare. You know, very rare indeed. Books were incredibly expensive. They were works of art. And so you only found those in the most high status of properties. So perhaps the only other thing to talk about is maybe a little bit about galleries. So galleries could be one of two things. A gallery just could be a short connecting corridor. So think the Haunted Gallery at Hampton Court Palace. That's almost like an enlarged corridor that got you from one part of the palace to another. So that was one type of gallery. The other type of gallery was almost it was just a room for pleasure. So perhaps we would call them long galleries. We'd know them as long galleries. So of course, all the palaces, all aristocratic houses had long galleries. There are many that I've written about recently. Certainly Hampton Court had a wonderful long gallery, as did Whitehall. All of them. Also places like Tibbles, which I've recently written about on the blog. All had wonderful galleries. They were for exercise, for recreation. There's records of Henry even shooting at the butts, i.e. doing archery in one of his long galleries at the Moor in Hertfordshire. But of course, they would have been decorated with portraits, and there may well have been musical instruments. You would have taken exercise there, particularly, of course, if the weather was bad outside. That's what they were for. And quite often you would also find a particularly spectacular room adjacent to or at the end of a long gallery. So I'm thinking now of, I think it's certainly true at Tibbles. There was a beautiful suite of rooms at the end of one of the long galleries there that Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, occupied when Elizabeth I was in residence. I'm thinking of, I think it's Sheffield Manor, where Cardinal Wolsey was held prisoner on his way back from York to London, and he was lodged in a rooms at the end of a gallery. And then my favourite one, but I'm really sad about this, at the end of the long gallery at Hampton Court, which is completely gone now, I'm talking the early gallery that was built by Henry VIII, there was a chamber called the Paradise Chamber, which I just think sounds amazing. And one of these days, I'd love to really research and learn more about that. Okay, so I think that's probably all I want to be saying about galleries. So let's have a little look at, Anna, what are you saying? So Anna's saying, is it Nightshades near Yeovil? The National has a fabulous gallery with the most amazing artwork. I don't think that's a property I've been to, but clearly it needs to be on my list. And in fact, maybe if we've got time, if you can think of a gallery that you really have loved visiting. There are just so many. There's an amazing gallery at Hampton Court, not Hampton Court, Haddon Hall. I think Scion House has got a fabulous gallery. So there are some spectacular long galleries to enjoy. If there's, let me know if you've got any other further questions. Susan Britton. So what are you saying? Susan's saying Paradise Gallery was a convention for naming galleries and rooms. No, I don't think so. So the rooms on the whole were labelled, as we've talked about, Great Hall, Presence Chamber, Great Watching Chamber, Privy Chamber, and so on and so forth. Then you just find these occasional rooms that have a specific name, like the Paradise Chamber. And the other one I can think of that comes to my mind immediately is the Gilt Chamber. And the Gilt Chamber was a chamber that was off the Long Gallery at Whitehall Palace. So it overlooked the River Thames. And that was another eponymous gallery. There is a very definite account of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, and I think it was Anne Boleyn's mother, and Henry Norris perhaps, who went to Whitehall after it had been seized by Henry from Cardinal Wolsey, and they found obviously huge amounts of rich stuff, and I'm fairly sure that the inventory that was taken showed that the gilt chamber was stuffed with really expensive gilded, golden, gilded, bejeweled plates. So I think sometimes certain chambers did pick up a name because they were particularly decorated in a certain way. There's only a couple that I say that come to mind off the top of my head, but they would be two of them. Okay, good. So have you been enjoying that? Was that interesting, useful? Do you have any other questions about Tudor houses? I think I mentioned that if you do subscribe to the blog, and just for those of you who might not know the blog, that is the blog address. If you're coming to watch me on these live chats for the first time, if you do subscribe to the blog, you will receive, first of all, a free digital mini guide, Download Your Tudor Weekend Away in Kent, which covers 3 Boleyn-related properties. So if you fancy a weekend away in Kent, it's perfect for you. And secondly, you will get a download called How to Read a Tudor House, which summarises much of what I have been saying here today. So thank you. Yes, great. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Sherry. And thank you, Monica. And I suppose the only other thing I wanted to say was to mention was this week's blog and podcast, which have gone live today. So I have been researching Thomas Cromwell's house at Austin Friars. As some of you will probably have already seen the blog. Now that is a place that I absolutely have wanted to write about for so long. It was such a joy to find that the wonderful Nick Holder, who is from the University of Exeter for his PhD, had done an amazing job of recreating the lost friaries of London. And whilst he was talking about Austin Friars, he kindly took the time to research and summarise, I think, one of the best accounts I've come across anywhere of Thomas Cromwell's house in Austin Friars. And there is actually I didn't think there was that much to know, but actually there are lots of contemporary records and images that allow us to recreate that house. Nick has done a great job and has allowed me to reproduce any of his images from his PhD thesis, which was so kind of him, because it allows me to get those to you so that you can see them for yourself. And there's also an accompanying podcast this month. It's all about Cromwell again. And I'm talking to author Carol McGrath, who's written a novel called Mistress Cromwell. And it's all about Thomas Cromwell's life as told through his wife Elizabeth's eyes. And actually, I absolutely love talking to Carol. I haven't researched Cromwell's life in detail, and I really enjoyed finding out about him. And as I've said elsewhere, such a fascinating man, even though I find it difficult to warm to him. I begrudgingly have to be in awe of the man, that's absolutely for sure. Good, well, so I'm just going to have a look here. What have we got? So Anna, thank you, loving these lives. And Gillian, thank you. Sarah, thank you. Lee and Jane, thank you, always educational. That's lovely. And Janice, have listened to your podcast on Cromwell. Great interview with Carol McGrath. That's fab. Yes, Catherine, Austin Friars, absolutely. Head on over to the blog. It's on my social media. Links are on my social media. They're on Facebook. So I think that's probably enough for me. I try and keep it not too much more than 20 minutes at a time. We're nearly coming to half an hour now. Time just flies by. So I wanted, first of all, to say thank you to all of you who have turned up and been on the live chat and shared this with me today. I do appreciate it. It's very nice not have to talk to myself. I have to admit, and to let me know that you do enjoy these and you find them useful. So I'm not sure what we're going to be doing next week. I've got a couple of things that we may do. So I'll just see which direction the week takes me. But as ever, if you have any suggestions or thoughts, make sure you put them in the comments. And I always keep an eye on those, as you know. So in the meantime, if you're listening to this on YouTube, this will go on to YouTube. As ever, all the live chats end up on YouTube within a day or two, so you can rewatch them. And if you're watching this for the first time and you're not yet subscribed to my channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and keep posted of everything that's going on. Okay, thank you to all of you. It's been lovely to share half an hour with you, and you have a good time wherever you are in the world. All right then, and I'll see you same time, live at 5, so it turns out, next week on Facebook. Okay, see you guys. Bye.